The conference room was packed. 14 people sat around the long table, and I could feel the tension even before Marcus began speaking. He stood at the front, clicking to the next slide. My stomach dropped when I saw it. There was my name, right under the words, $4 million client loss, in bright red letters. "I need everyone to understand something," Marcus said, his voice steady and calm. "This failure falls entirely on Megan's shoulders. The decisions she made cost us this account." My hands went numb. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to process what was happening. No one had warned me. No one had pulled me aside before this meeting. Marcus hadn't even looked at me when he said my name. Around me, colleagues shifted in their seats. Some stared at their laptops. Others looked at me with expressions I couldn't read. Pity. Relief that it wasn't them. My chest felt tight. My ears started ringing. But through the shock, one thought pushed its way forward, clear and cold. He planned this. This wasn't a mistake or a heat-of-the-moment accusation. Marcus had prepared this presentation. He had chosen this moment, this audience, this exact way to destroy my reputation. And I suddenly understood why. I sat frozen in my chair while Marcus continued talking. He moved smoothly through the rest of his slides, explaining how the client relationship had deteriorated, how deadlines were missed, how poor judgment calls led to this disaster. He never asked me to explain. Never requested my side of the story. The meeting wasn't about finding out what went wrong. It was about making sure everyone knew who to blame. I wanted to speak. I wanted to stand up and tell them the truth. But my voice was stuck somewhere deep in my throat, trapped by shock and disbelief. Across the table, Marcus finally glanced in my direction. Not with anger or frustration, just disappointment. Like I was a child who had let him down after he'd given me so many chances. That look made my blood run cold. 'Cause I recognized it. I'd seen that exact expression before on his face, directed at other people who were no longer with the company. People whose departures had been quiet and sudden. People whose names were never mentioned again. The meeting ended. People filed out quickly, avoiding eye contact with me. I stayed in my seat, staring at the empty screen where my name had been displayed like a criminal charge. How did this happen? How did I become the villain in a story I didn't even know was being written? I walked back to my desk in a daze. The office felt different now. Quieter. People glanced at me and then quickly looked away. A few colleagues I usually chatted with suddenly became very interested in their computer screens as I passed. No one asked if I was okay. No one questioned what they'd just witnessed. They were relieved. Relieved it was me and not them standing under that red text. I sat down at my desk and stared at my monitor. My hands were shaking slightly. Part of me wanted to cry. Another part wanted to march straight to Marcus's office and demand answers. But I did neither. Instead, something strange happened. The shock began to fade, replaced by something sharper, something focused. I opened my laptop and stared at my email inbox. Thousands of messages. Years of correspondence. Documentation of every project I'd ever worked on, including the one that had just been used to destroy my career. My fingers moved to the keyboard almost on their own. I typed Marcus's name into the search bar and hit enter. The screen filled with results. Hundreds of emails between us. I started scrolling, my eyes scanning subject lines and dates. And then I stopped. There it was. An email from 3 months ago. Subject line. Concerns about Riverside timeline. My name is Megan Whitfield, and before yesterday I was the person Marcus trusted most. I'd been with Hartman Solutions for 7 years. I wasn't flashy or loud. I didn't play office politics. I just did my job well, kept detailed records, and solved problems that no one else wanted to touch. That's exactly why Marcus kept giving me the difficult projects. The ones with impossible deadlines. The ones where clients were already angry. The ones that required someone who could follow complex instructions and execute them perfectly. I never said no. I documented everything. I asked questions when something didn't make sense. I flagged risks before they became disasters. Until Riverside Financial. The project that just cost me everything started 6 months ago. It was supposed to be our biggest client win of the year. A complete system overhaul that would bring in steady revenue for years. But from the beginning, something felt wrong about it. The timeline was too aggressive. The client's expectations didn't match what we could realistically deliver. The budget was tight. I raised these concerns multiple times. In emails, in meetings, in one-on-one conversations with Marcus. Every single time he told me the same thing. We need this win. Make it work. So I did what I always did. Followed orders. I executed his decisions. I pushed my team to meet impossible deadlines. And I kept records of everything. The email I found was dated March 15th. 3 months before everything fell apart. I opened it and started reading. My own words from months ago felt like they were written by a different person. Someone who still believed that raising concerns would protect her. Marcus, I wanted to follow up on our conversation about the Riverside timeline. Based on the current resource allocation and the scope changes the client requested last week, I don't think we can deliver the full system upgrade by June 30th without significant risk. The development team estimates we need at least 8 more weeks to properly test everything. If we rush this, we could end up with stability issues that damage the client relationship long-term. I recommend we either extend the deadline or reduce the initial scope. I'm happy to present both options to the client if you'd like. Best Megan. I remembered writing this email. I'd spent an hour crafting it, trying to be professional and clear without sounding like I was refusing to do my job. I scrolled down to Marcus's response, sent the same day. Megan. I appreciate the concern, but we've already committed to this timeline. The client is expecting delivery by June 30th, and that's what we're going to give them. Move forward as planned. If issues come up, we'll handle them. I'll take full responsibility if this doesn't work out the way we hope. Marcus. I stared at that last sentence. I'll take full responsibility. My hand started shaking again, but this time it wasn't from shock. It was from something else entirely. Kept reading. Email after email. A paper trail of every decision that had led to the disaster Marcus just blamed me for. March 22nd. I warned that cutting the testing phase would create security vulnerabilities. Marcus told me to proceed anyway. April 8th. I requested additional developers. Marcus said no, we needed to stay within budget. May 3rd. I flagged critical bugs that needed fixing before launch. Marcus said they weren't showstoppers and we'd patch them later. June 15th. I sent a detailed list of remaining issues and asked to delay the launch by 2 weeks. Marcus scheduled the launch for June 30th anyway. Every single decision that broke the project came from him. And every single time, I had documented my objections and his instructions to move forward. I wasn't blameless. I had executed these plans. I had pushed my team to meet deadlines I knew were unrealistic. But I hadn't made the decisions. I had followed orders from the person who was supposed to be steering the ship. The person who just told a room full of executives that I was responsible for sinking it. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. This wasn't just about one failed project. This was deliberate. Marcus had known the project might fail. He'd ignored every warning. And when it did fail, he'd already decided who would take the fall. Me. But he'd made one mistake. He'd forgotten that I document everything. An hour later, Marcus stopped by my desk. I was still going through emails, saving key messages to a separate folder. When I saw him approaching, I quickly minimized the window. Hey, Megan. His voice was soft, almost gentle. I know that meeting was rough. I looked up at him. He had his concerned boss expression on. Sympathetic eyes. Slight frown. The same look he probably practiced in the mirror. Yeah, I said quietly. It was unexpected. I'm sorry you had to hear it that way. He leaned against the edge of my desk, casual and comfortable. But when something this big fails, leadership needs to understand what went wrong. These things happen in our industry. These things happen. As if losing a $4 million client was like spilling coffee. Just one of those things. I understand, I said, keeping my voice neutral. He studied my face for a moment, probably trying to gauge whether I was going to cause problems. Whether I was going to fight back or quietly accept my fate. Gave him nothing. No tears. No anger. Just a tired, defeated nod. Good. He straightened up, looking satisfied. Take the rest of the day if you need to. We'll talk more tomorrow about next steps. Next steps. That was code for your exit plan. Thanks, Marcus. I appreciate you checking on me. He walked away, and I watched his reflection in my dark monitor until he disappeared around the corner. Then I went back to saving emails. I stayed late that night. The office emptied out around 6, and by 7, I was alone in my section. Just me, my computer, and years of digital evidence. I wasn't just looking at the Riverside project anymore. I was looking at patterns. I pulled up files from other projects Marcus had managed. Projects I'd heard about but hadn't worked on directly. Projects that had quietly failed or underperformed. There was the Kensington account lost 2 years ago. The project lead on that one was a guy named Troy. He'd been let go shortly after, and no one talked about him anymore. I found emails between Marcus and Troy. The same pattern. Troy raising concerns. Marcus pushing forward. Project failing. Troy disappearing. Then there was the Morrison redesign last year. The lead designer on that one was Vanessa. She'd quit suddenly, and rumor was she'd been difficult to work with. Found her emails too. Same story. Concerns raised. Orders to proceed. Failure. Exit. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. How many people had Marcus sacrificed to protect his own reputation? How many careers had he destroyed to make sure his name never appeared next to the word failure? And why had I never seen this before? Because I'd trusted him. Because when you're the one getting the praise, the promotions, the big projects, you don't look too closely at the people who came before you. I pulled out a flash drive and started copying files. Not just emails. Everything. Project plans. Timeline documents. Meeting notes. Approval forms. I worked until midnight, organizing everything into folders. No emotion. No commentary. Just facts, dates, and documentation. The next morning, Marcus called me into his office. I walked in with my coffee, acting like I'd spent the night crying into my pillow instead of building a case against him. Sit down, Megan. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sep. He folded his hands, looking thoughtful and serious. I've been thinking about yesterday. About how we move forward from this. Okay, I said softly. Leadership is going to want answers. They're going to look closely at what happened with Riverside. And when they do... He paused, letting the implications hang in the air. I think it's important that you take accountability. There it was. Not, we should figure out what went wrong. Not, let's review the decisions together. Take accountability. Leadership respects humility, he continued. They respect people who can admit when they've made mistakes. If you handle this right, you might still have a future here. He was offering me a maybe, a possibility if I played along with his version of events. I'll think about it, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled. Actually smiled. Good. That's the smart move, Megan. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. I nodded and stood up to leave. Oh, and Megan, he called after me. Let's keep this between us for now. No need to get others involved until we know how leadership wants to proceed. Translation. Don't talk to anyone who might ask questions. Of course, I said. I closed his office door behind me and walked back to my desk with steady steps. He thought he'd won. That evening I got a call from my friend Bailey. We'd started at Hartman the same year and had stayed close even though she'd moved to a different department. Are you okay? She asked as soon as I answered. I heard about the meeting. I was sitting in my car in the parking garage, not quite ready to go home yet. Yeah, I'm okay. Megan, everyone's talking about it. What Marcus did was horrible. It's complicated, I said carefully. No, it's not. Bailey's voice was firm. I've seen this before. Marcus always finds someone to blame when things go wrong. Remember Troy. Remember Vanessa. So I wasn't the only one who'd noticed. What happened to them? I asked, even though I'd already read their emails. Same thing that's happening to you. Projects failed. Marcus pointed fingers. They left. And everyone just forgot about it and moved on. I was quiet for a moment. Why didn't anyone say anything? Because saying something means making yourself a target, Bailey said softly. Everyone knows how this works. Keep your head down. Don't make waves. Survive. Yeah, I said. That makes sense. What are you going to do? I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. But there was something else in my eyes now. Something that hadn't been there yesterday. Determination. I'm going to survive, I said. Just not the way Marcus thinks. The next few days were strange. I went to work, attended meetings, responded to emails. On the surface, everything looked normal. But underneath I was preparing. I organized all my documentation into a clean, simple timeline. No angry accusations. No emotional language. Just facts. March 15th. Concern raised about timeline. Approval given to proceed. April 8th. Request for additional resources. Request denied. May 3rd. Critical issues flagged. Instructions to proceed with launch. June 15th. Request to delay launch. Request denied. June 30th. Launch proceeds. System failures begin within 48 hours. I included screenshots of every email, every approval, every decision that came from Marcus. The document grew to 20 pages. 20 pages of evidence that told a very different story than the one Marcus had presented. Meanwhile, Marcus became unusually attentive. He stopped by my desk every day asking how I was doing, offering encouragement, acting like a concerned mentor guiding someone through a difficult time. I played my part perfectly. Quiet. Grateful for his support. Unthreatening. He had no idea what I was preparing. No idea that every friendly conversation was just giving me more time to build my case. On Friday morning I got an email from Helena Burke, the senior vice president. Subject line. Riverside post-mortem meeting. The meeting was scheduled for Monday at 10. Attendance required. Marcus, me, Helena, and 2 other executives I'd never worked with directly. My heart started pounding. This was it. The official inquiry. The moment where Marcus would try to cement his version of events. I had the weekend to make my final preparations. Saturday I printed everything. 2 complete copies of my documentation. One for me, one for Helena. Sunday I practiced. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and walked through the timeline, keeping my voice calm and factual. No anger. No accusations. Just evidence. By Sunday night I was ready. Barely slept. Not from nerves but from something else. Anticipation. For the first time since that terrible meeting, I felt like I had control over what happened next. Marcus thought he was walking into a formality. A meeting where his version of events would be officially accepted and my career would be officially over. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd forgotten that I document everything. And documentation doesn't lie. Monday morning felt different. The office had the same sound, the same smell of coffee and electronics, but I walked through it like I was seeing it for the first time. Some colleagues avoided my eyes. Others gave me sympathetic looks. A few whispered to each other as I passed. I wondered how many of them expected me to just disappear like Troy and Vanessa. At 9:45, I gathered my materials and headed to the conference room. Marcus was already there, looking confident and relaxed. He had a single notebook in front of him. No documents. No evidence. Why would he need any? He'd already told everyone what happened. Helena arrived next, followed by the 2 other executives. Philip Rourke from operations and Olivia Cross from finance. They all looked serious but not hostile. This was just another meeting for them. Another item to check off their list. Thank you all for being here, Helena began, sitting at the head of the table. We need to understand what happened with Riverside Financial so we can prevent similar situations in the future. Marcus nodded sympathetically. Absolutely. I think we all want answers. Helena turned to me. Megan, we've heard Marcus's account of the project. I'd like to hear your perspective. This was my moment. Could stay quiet. Accept the blame. Take Marcus's advice about showing humility. Or I could tell the truth. I placed my folder on the table. I'd like to walk you through the timeline of decisions that led to the project failure. I have documentation of everything. Marcus's expression flickered. Just for a second. Confusion mixed with the first hint of concern. I opened the folder and slid copies across the table to Helena, Philip, and Olivia. Then I began. The Riverside project started in January, I said, keeping my voice steady. From the beginning, there were concerns about the timeline and resources. I walked them through each phase, each warning I'd raised, each decision Marcus had made to proceed anyway. I didn't editorialize. I didn't assign blame. I just read dates and quoted emails. On March 15th, I sent Marcus an email expressing concern about the timeline. His response was to move forward as planned and that he would take responsibility if issues arose. I showed them the email. Marcus shifted in his seat. I remember that conversation. We had to balance risk with client expectations. I understand, I said calmly. On April 8th, I requested additional developers to meet the timeline. That request was denied due to budget constraints. I showed them that email too. On May 3rd, I identified critical bugs that needed to be fixed before launch. Marcus determined they could be patched post-launch. Another email. Marcus's confident expression was starting to crack. Megan, I think you're misrepresenting. I'm reading directly from our email correspondence, I said, meeting his eyes for the first time. On June 15th, I requested a 2-week delay to address remaining issues. That request was denied, and launch proceeded on June 30th as originally scheduled. I placed the final set of emails on the table. The system began experiencing critical failures within 48 hours of launch. Riverside Financial terminated the contract on July 8th. The room was completely silent. Helena was reading through the documents, her expression unreadable. Philip and Olivia were doing the same. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked lost. Marcus, Helena said slowly, not looking up from the papers. Did you approve all these decisions? Marcus cleared his throat. The situation was complex. We had competing priorities. Client expectations. Budget constraints. Megan was the project lead. She should have. I was the project manager, I interrupted quietly. But I didn't make these decisions. I executed them. Every major choice about timeline, resources, and launch was approved by Marcus. I have his written approval for each one. That's not, Marcus started, but Helena held up her hand. Let me get this straight. She flipped through the documents. On March 15th, Megan raised concerns about the timeline. You told her to proceed and said you'd take responsibility. Marcus hesitated. In context. It's a yes or no question. Yes, but. And on April 8th, she requested additional developers, which would have helped meet the deadline. You denied that request. The budget didn't allow. Yes or no? Marcus's jaw tightened. Yes. Helena continued through the timeline, asking about each decision point. Each time, Marcus tried to explain or justify, but the answers all came down to the same thing. Yes, he'd made those calls. Yes, he'd overruled Megan's concerns. Yes, he'd approved moving forward despite the risks. Philip leaned back in his chair, studying Marcus with a look I couldn't quite identify. Olivia was taking notes, her pen moving quickly across her pad. Why wasn't this information included in your initial presentation? Helena asked Marcus. I didn't think it was relevant to. You didn't think your decisions were relevant to understanding why the project failed? Marcus had no answer for that. Helena turned to me. Megan, why didn't you push back harder on these decisions? It was a fair question. One I'd asked myself many times over the past week. I raised concerns every time, I said carefully. But Marcus was my direct supervisor. When he gave me instructions to proceed, I assumed he had information or perspective I didn't have. I trusted his judgment. Even when you thought the project would fail, I didn't know it would fail. I knew there were risks. That's why I documented everything and kept pushing for changes that would reduce those risks. Helena nodded slowly. She looked at Marcus again. In your presentation last week, you stated that this failure fell entirely on Megan. Based on what I'm seeing here, that assessment was inaccurate. I may have simplified. You threw your project manager under the bus, Philip cut in. His voice was sharp. You blamed her publicly for decisions you made. Decisions she explicitly warned you about. Marcus's face was turning red. That's not what happened. The project failed because of execution issues. Megan was responsible for following your orders, Olivia finished. She'd stopped taking notes and was staring at Marcus with unconcealed disgust. She followed your orders, documented her concerns, and when it all fell apart, you decided to make her the scapegoat. The word hung in the air. Scapegoat. That's exactly what I was. What Troy had been. What Vanessa had been. Marcus must have realized how bad this looked, because he suddenly shifted tactics. I understand how this appears, but you have to understand the pressure I was under. The board was expecting results. We needed this win. I made judgment calls that seemed right at the time. And when those judgment calls led to a $4 million loss, Helena said quietly, you blamed someone else. Marcus tried to salvage the situation. He talked about his years with the company, his track record, the other successful projects he'd managed. But Helena, Philip, and Olivia weren't interested in his resume. They were interested in the timeline in front of them. The evidence that Marcus had systematically made poor decisions and then tried to hide behind someone else. I think we need to pause this meeting, Helena finally said. Marcus, please step outside. We need to discuss next steps. Marcus stood slowly. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than confidence in his eyes. Fear. He left the room, closing the door behind him. Helena, Philip, and Olivia huddled at the far end of the table, speaking in low voices. I sat quietly, my hands folded in my lap, trying to process what had just happened. I'd walked into this meeting expecting to defend myself. Instead, I'd watched Marcus's carefully constructed story collapse under the weight of evidence. After about 10 minutes, Helena came back to her seat. Megan, I want to apologize. What happened in that initial meeting was completely inappropriate. You were publicly blamed for failures that weren't your responsibility. Thank you, I said softly. We're going to conduct a full review of this situation. In the meantime, you're not going to face any negative consequences from the Riverside failure. You did your job. You raised appropriate concerns. The fact that those concerns were ignored isn't your fault. Philip added, we'd also like to review your other projects. Your documentation standards are impressive. That kind of thoroughness is valuable. Olivia leaned forward. How would you feel about taking on a different role? Something with more oversight, where your attention to detail could prevent situations like this. And blinked. Were they offering me a promotion? I'd need to think about it, I managed to say. Of course. Take your time. Helena stood up. Thank you for being prepared today. Your professionalism in a very difficult situation has been noted. I walked out of the conference room in a daze. Marcus was gone. His office door was closed, but I could see movement through the frosted glass. I went back to my desk and sat down. My hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear this time, but from the adrenaline of what had just happened. Bailey appeared at my cubicle within minutes. What happened? You were in there forever. I looked up at her. I think it's going to be okay. Really? He nodded. I showed them everything. All the emails. All the approvals. They saw the truth. Bailey's eyes widened. And Marcus? He's in trouble. Bad trouble. She pulled up a chair and sat down next to me. Megan, that's amazing. I can't believe you actually fought back. I didn't fight, I said quietly. I just told the truth. That's fighting. That's exactly what fighting looks like when you're smart about it. Maybe she was right. Maybe standing up for yourself doesn't always mean raising your voice. Sometimes it means having evidence that speaks louder than any words could. The rest of the day was strange. Word spread quickly that something had happened in the meeting with Helena. People kept glancing at me, whispering to each other. Around 3 o'clock, an announcement went out via email. Effective immediately, Marcus Patterson is no longer with Hartman Solutions. We appreciate his years of service and wish him well in his future endeavors. That was it. No explanation. No details. Just absence where he used to be. His office was empty by 4 o'clock. He had already removed his computer access. His name was gone from the department directory. It was like he'd never existed. I thought I'd feel triumphant. I thought I'd feel vindicated or satisfied or something dramatic. Instead, I just felt tired. I'd spent a week building a case, preparing evidence, practicing my presentation. And in the end, the truth had been simple. Marcus had made bad decisions and tried to blame someone else. The emails proved it. The timeline proved it. That evening I stayed late again, but this time not to work. Just to sit in the quiet office and process everything that had happened. A week ago my career was over. Today I was being offered a promotion. The difference was documentation. Evidence. The simple act of keeping records and standing up with facts instead of emotions. That night, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Vanessa Torres. Bailey gave me your number. I heard what happened. Thank you, Vanessa. The designer who'd left last year after the Morrison project failed. Texted back. Thanks for reaching out. I'm sorry for what happened to you. Her reply came quickly. Don't be sorry. Be proud. You did what I couldn't. You fought back with evidence instead of just walking away. You probably saved the next person he would have thrown under the bus. That hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't thought about it that way. I'd been so focused on defending myself that I hadn't considered the bigger picture. How many more people would Marcus have sacrificed if I hadn't exposed his pattern? I texted back. Did you have documentation too? Yes. But I was too angry to use it effectively. I just wanted to get out. You stayed calm and that made all the difference. I put my phone down and stared at the ceiling of my apartment. Staying calm. That's what had saved me. Not yelling or accusing or getting emotional. Just presenting facts in a way that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. The next morning I got a call from Helena's assistant. Helena wanted to meet with me privately. Helena's office was on the executive floor, a place I'd rarely visited. The space was all glass and modern furniture, with a view of the city that made everything else feel small. Thanks for coming up, Helena said, gesturing to a chair. I wanted to talk to you about what happens next. I sat down, my folder of documentation still in my bag. Even now, I couldn't seem to let it go. First, I want to apologize again for what you experienced. The way Marcus handled that initial meeting was unacceptable. No employee should be publicly blamed for decisions they didn't make. I appreciate that, I said. Second, I want you to know that we've started a broader review. We're looking at other projects Marcus managed. And we're talking to people who worked under him. Your situation wasn't isolated. He nodded. I'd already figured that out. Third, Helena continued. We'd like to offer you a position as Senior Project Oversight Manager. It's a new role we're creating. You'd be responsible for reviewing high-risk projects, ensuring proper documentation, and serving as a check on decision-making processes. The title was impressive. But more than that, it was exactly the kind of role that could have prevented what happened to me. You'd be reporting directly to Philip in operations. Competitive salary increase. And most importantly, authority to question decisions and require proper documentation before major commitments are made. It was a good offer. Better than good. But something made me hesitate. Can I think about it? Yes. Helena looked surprised but nodded. Of course. Take a few days. Let me know by the end of the week. I spent the next 2 days thinking about Helena's offer. The promotion was everything I should want. Recognition. Authority. A chance to make sure what happened to me didn't happen to others. But something didn't feel right. Wednesday evening I was working late when I got an email from a company called NextPoint Consulting. The name was familiar. They were one of Hartman's competitors, known for treating employees well and having a strong company culture. The email was from their VP of Operations, a woman named Patricia Wells. Dear Megan, I've been following the situation at Hartman Solutions with interest. Your professionalism and documentation standards have been noticed by people in our industry. If you're open to a conversation about opportunities at NextPoint, I'd love to schedule a call. I stared at the email. This was unexpected. I did some research on NextPoint. Everything I found was positive. Good reviews from employees. Strong track record. Leadership that valued transparency and accountability. Thursday morning I called Patricia. The conversation lasted an hour. She was direct and honest about what they were looking for. Someone who could bring structure and proper oversight to their growing project management department. Someone who understood the importance of documentation and wasn't afraid to raise concerns. We've built our reputation on delivering what we promise, Patricia said. We don't throw people under the bus when things go wrong. We figure out what happened and learn from it. That sounds almost too good to be true, I said, only half joking. I know. But you can talk to our employees. Check our track record. We're not perfect, but we try to do things right. She named a salary figure that made my breath catch. It was significantly more than Hartman was offering. I'd need to think about it, I said. Take your time. But Megan, whatever you decide, you should be proud of what you did. Standing up with evidence instead of emotion. That takes real courage. Thursday night I made my decision. Friday morning I sent an email to Helena. Thank you for the offer of Senior Project Oversight Manager. I appreciate your confidence in me and the effort to make things right. However, I've decided to pursue an opportunity elsewhere. My last day at Hartman will be 2 weeks from today. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Helena called me an hour later. I'm disappointed, she said. But I understand. May I ask where you're going? NextPoint Consulting. There was a pause. That's a great company. They're lucky to have you. Thank you. Megan, I want you to know that what you did here mattered. You exposed a serious problem in our management structure. Because of you, we're implementing new oversight procedures and training. You made this company better. I just told the truth, I said. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do. The next 2 weeks passed quickly. I wrapped up my projects, trained my replacements, and said goodbye to colleagues. Some were genuinely sad to see me go. Others were probably just relieved the drama was over. On my last day, Bailey took me to lunch. I still can't believe you're leaving, she said. After everything you fought for. I didn't fight to stay, I explained. I fought for the truth. Once that was out, my job was done. Still, they were finally valuing you. They valued me after I proved I couldn't be pushed around. NextPoint values people from the start. That's the difference. Bailey smiled. I'm going to miss you. You can still call me anytime. That afternoon I packed up my desk. 7 years of my career fit into 2 boxes. Photos, awards, coffee mug with my name on it. I took one last look at the office where I'd spent so much of my life. Where I'd been trusted, then betrayed, then vindicated. And then I walked out. 6 months later, I sat in my new office at NextPoint. Had my name on the door. Director of Project Excellence, Megan Whitfield. The work was challenging but fair. When I raised concerns, people listened. When projects hit problems, we solved them together. No one looked for scapegoats. No one threw anyone under the bus. Patricia stopped by one afternoon. "How are you settling in?" "Really well," I said honestly. "Good. I wanted you to know that 2 of your former colleagues from Hartman just applied here. They listed you as a reference." Smiled. "Who?" "Bailey Morrison and someone named Troy Stevens." "Roy." "The guy from the Kensington project. The one Marcus had blamed before me." "I'll give them great references," I said. That evening I got a LinkedIn message from someone I didn't know. A young project manager at another company. "Hi Megan. I heard your story through Industry Connections. I'm dealing with a similar situation where my manager is making bad decisions and I'm worried I'll be blamed. Do you have any advice?" I thought about it for a while before responding. "Document everything. Keep records of decisions, approvals, and concerns you raise. Stay professional and calm. And remember that the truth is more powerful than any narrative someone else tries to create about you. Good luck." A year after Marcus blamed me for that $4 million loss, I'm in a position I never imagined. I lead a team of 20 people. We've successfully delivered 15 major projects. Not one of them involved throwing someone under the bus or hiding behind scapegoats. I still keep detailed documentation. It's a habit I'll never break. But now it's not just to protect myself. It's to protect my team. To create a clear record of decisions so no one ever has to wonder what really happened. Sometimes I think about Marcus. About whether he learned anything from what happened. Whether he's still out there blaming other people for his mistakes. But mostly I don't think about him at all. Because here's what I learned. You don't need to raise your voice to stand up for yourself. You don't need to get angry or emotional or dramatic. You just need evidence. You need to know your worth, document your work, and stand firm when someone tries to rewrite history. I never contacted Marcus after he left Hartman. Never sent an angry email or a satisfied message. I didn't need to. Because I won the moment I walked into that conference room with a folder full of truth. And he lost the moment he forgot that I document everything. The emails told the story. The timeline proved who was responsible. And in the end, facts were more powerful than any lie he could tell. That's what I want people to understand. When someone tries to destroy your reputation, your career, your livelihood, you don't have to accept it. You don't have to quietly disappear. You just have to remember. The truth doesn't need volume. It needs evidence. And if you have that, you have everything you need.